last talk, which will be given by Sthaneshwar Timalsina. He's an expert in Indian comparative philosophy, Vedic and Sanskrit studies, yoga studies, and philosophy of mind. He's a professor at San Diego State University. His publications include Tantric Visual Culture, A Cognitive Approach, Routledge 2015, Language and Images, Visualization and Meaning in Tantras, Peter Lamb, 2015, and Consciousness in Indian Philosophy, The Advaita Doctrine of Awareness Only, Routledge 2008. And the title of his talk is God, Isvara, and the Brahman. Sthaneshwar, please, the floor is yours. I suppose he's here.
It looks like his microphone is muted.
Can you hear me?
Oh, now you can.
Now can.
Okay, good. Okay. So
it's only me, but I'm sorry, I'm not seeing you. I mean, properly. I mean,
Yeah.
your camera seems to be on
the camera. The camera.
It's not in the original position.
No, what I can do though. Let me see. This is like going up. Let me see. This is the way it should go.
Everyone is seeing like me.
I see you, right? But can you could not see me, right?
No, yeah. It's on the not in the horizontal position. It's on the vertical position. That's I'd like to look at you like that.
You were sideways before. That's what he was trying to say.
Yeah, okay. Let me see. How do I do that? Let me see. I'm just not so familiar with these equipments. Oh man. Yeah, like see that like how does this thing go? Oh, okay, there. Okay. Let me see if I can. Do you see me?
No, that's okay. That's perfect.
But yeah. Oh, okay. It is straight now. I can push that camera a little bit further. Oh, sorry about that. I don't know why my. Is it okay? Or is it okay?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, let us start. God, Isvara, and the Brahman. A case for a post-perennial comparative theology. There is no argument that all cultures have something to describe the absolute, and all cultures have explored the reason and value of our being in the world. Sometimes the description of the terms for the absolute in different cultures resonate with each other, and we tend to appreciate these similarities. Our social reality is also such that we are getting more and more interconnected, and our cultural differences are becoming marginal forces in light of our business and political interests. But there is something more sinister than these simple social expectations. Cultural colonialism does not require a flat-out denial of other cultures. It can subsume others and reframe the experiences from other cultures within the parameters of the colonizing culture. If the first is a product of naive perennialism, the latter reflects the discourse crafted by missionaries and the gurus. On the one hand, addressing the constructive role of cultural language, we come to the other pole of the argument that we live in separate cultural islands. Both faith leaders and the scholarly community have contributed to the misconceptions by blurring the boundaries. While some scholars, for instance, Raimundo Panikkar, have warned us that Brahman is certainly not the one true and living God of the Abrahamic traditions, nor can it be said that Shakti or Kami are the same as Brahman, and yet they are not totally unrelated. The categories Brahman, Ishvara, and God have been constantly blurred with the titles such as How to Know God, Against the Hindu God. On the other spectrum of the scene, the consumer market is taken by the fever of perennialist categories that has led to the unique vocabulary such as God realization or spiritual awakening, or the statements such as I am God, there is not one God but only God, or Hinduism is a monotheistic religion. In this paradigm, gurus and acharyas become saints and prophets, and we come across books such as Realizing God, Lectures on Vedanta, or the Bhagavad Gita, Royal Science of God Realization, where the quest has been to blur the parameters of Hinduism and Christianity and to make the Hindu text such as Bhagavad Gita an equivalent to the Bible. A naive reading of perennialism gives us an impression that it supports harmony among cultures by flattening the religious terrains, but tracing the claim that all religions reveal the same truth or lead to the same God. But if we are to critically analyze these claims, what the narrators are affirming is the universalization of their own cultural experience or creating new hybrid forms of cultural experience. The fundamental problem with this approach lies in intolerance to difference, that cultural maxims are acceptable because they are the same no matter who the speakers are. The parameters of this paper encompass cultural difference and analysis of the categories of God, Ishvara, and the Brahman makes an exemplary case. On the social front, this approach makes a case for a mutual understanding, respect, empathy, or social recognition, for all these concepts are meaningless in a culturally homogenized terrain. But these are not some simple categories to follow a strict definition and draw comparisons. What God meant for the ancient Hebrew people is different from what it meant to Aquinas or Hegel. Equally problematic are the concepts of Ishvara and the Brahman. This vagueness has been a fertile ground for misconception. The objective here is to demonstrate an urgency for a critical gaze on these categories. But it is not possible for me to explore the range in which the categories Ishvara and the Brahman have been used in classical Hindu texts. For what is meant by Ishvara to Patanjali or by Shankara, or what it means in the system of Nyaya or the Pashupata system, are very different. For the sake of the scope of this paper, I am limiting myself to the Advaita of Shankara. There are two reasons in this limitation. One, the market Hinduism that makes God as equivalent to Brahman or sometimes to Ishvara has broadly appropriated Advaita categories, and the proponents of this equivalence are primarily from the school of Advaita. And two, the range of concepts used to define these categories, even within the Advaita of Shankara, buttress a case for a closer analysis of the categories across schools. In all accounts, this comparison alone is sufficient to demonstrate the flaws in the perennial approach of homogenizing the categories. While the category God is too broad to be analyzed in a few lines, I'll start with a few defining parameters for the sake of comparison. And if the distinction between the philosopher's God and the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is required to pursue this investigation, I will align this effort with the first, as I'm examining central arguments in defense of God. What is God like? For God, we can always find marginal readings on God or the Brahman that make them almost identical. But to be honest and thorough, we have to rely on the mainstream understandings or broadly accepted categories. And if read accordingly, the category God is primarily understood in dualistic terms. God is perfect, meaning he's unsurpassable in power, knowledge, and goodness. He creates the world out of nothing, and he acts in history for every single historical event unfolds according to his plan. While this God is disembodied, with all the anthropomorphic descriptions being read as negations, this God is endowed with desire and passion. What follows are a few of the core arguments presented in defense of God throughout the history of Christianity. Number one, God is the initial mover. This argument comes in various flavors, from Aristotle's unmoved mover to its appropriation in the theology of Aquinas. The argument is that change is possible, at least in its initial phase, only with a subject to change something. This unactualized actualizer is explained in the Aristotelian paradigm as one immutable, eternal, immaterial, incorporeal, perfect, omnipotent, and fully good. It's considered to be the case of the existence of things, as this is the being that keeps all entities in being from moment to moment. The above argument rests on the assumption that for an entity X to exist, God must exist. Rather than arguing for a cause, assuming God to be the initial cause rests on the assumption of change, that there must be an initial mover for change to occur. The above argument applies to the transcendentality of God, and there is no law that the category causality cannot apply to transcendental entity. The argument for a purely actual actualizer leads to the assumption that God is an unmovable mover, that there are no potentials within God that are yet to be actualized. The next point is, for all composite things to come into being, there must be a simple, non-composite one to cause the composites. And number three, the objects like universals or numbers must be true. These objects do not depend on material things for their existence, and so God is the ultimate ground for their existence. And number four, there must be pure existence that we can extract from the existence of entities in the world. This pure existence is God. And number five, there must be one necessary being for itself, and things that exist do exist for the reason as determined by this entity, God. Of course, there are different camps within Christian theology, with some stressing absolute perfection while others focusing on God's personhood. The second camp focuses on God's desire to be in dynamic relation with humanity. As it will be clear when we address the categories Brahman and Isvara, this tension is not relevant in Advaita, as a clear distinction between Brahman and Isvara makes it possible for both the immutable singularity of the absolute, while with personal engagement with creation of Isvara. The categories of monism, pantheism, and panentheism are not applicable if we are serious about reading Advaita. For the singularity of the Brahman is not that of all in one, but of pure singularity, and the concept of transcendence is relative and contradicts the non-duality of the Brahman. Furthermore, numeric one does not apply to Brahman, as it is not a countable entity. While there are other schools of thought within Hinduism that come close to panpsychism, with every particular in the cosmos being conscious, or cosmopsychism, that the cosmos as a whole has conscious states, the Advaita of Shankara underscores the singularity of consciousness, rejecting external properties to the pure being and luminosity of consciousness. As long as we are looking for consciousness in matter, we are not engaging Advaita. And if we are searching for materiality within consciousness, we are not understanding Advaita. It is therefore contextual that we engage the categories Brahman and Isvara before making broader assumptions. So I'll skip a few sections and just jump to comparative analysis. Some scholars, for instance, Harstone and Rees, have outlined the categories of being eternal, temporal, conscious, knower, and include the world to compass the absolute in different cultures. Diller makes a case that the absolute in Shankara's understanding meets 4 of the above criteria except for being temporal. Diller's assumption underlines that Brahman is eternal. However, in the above conversation, we have clarified that the word eternity is applied to refer to the Brahman only in the sense that it is not determined by the past or the future modes of time. This means that the word eternal in this context does not mean something constant, but only something that is not temporal. Brahman does not posit itself as an entity. It just is that it cannot be negated in any mode of time. The same applies to other positive attributes imposed on Brahman. Some are confusing the term consciousness, Chaitanya, describing the Brahman, and make an assessment that Brahman is all-knowing. But the problem is, Brahman is not a conscious subject, but consciousness in itself, and does not possess any subjectivity. For the sake of comparison, some have argued that Brahman includes the world. This position also does not make sense from the Advaita perspective. When the Advaitins say that Brahman alone exists, they are not suggesting that the world exists within Brahman, just like the stars in the sky. Brahman is not a class within the world, being its particular. The world is not a quality of the Brahman. One may then be tempted to compare God with Isvara, for several of the categories addressed above are indeed applicable to Isvara, who is the omniscient and all-powerful creator of the world. Accordingly, the category theocosm used to describe the world as identical to Brahman underscores only the positive attributes used to describe the Brahman, but fails to address the higher teachings where any conversation, particularly an affirming description, is a moot point. If someone says the snake is but a rope, that does not confirm the identity between the rope and the snake. The same way, if an Advaitin says the world is but the Brahman, this does not lead to theocosm. If our objective is to make an honest comparison, we first have to not impose the ideas that we like upon classical philosophers. As I have outlined above, the causality superimposed on Brahman is based solely on vivarta, an erroneous projection, and therefore the Brahman is not a material cause like clay for pots or an efficient cause like a potter making pots. And this is not even following Ajati or Drishti Srishti, the Advaita models that reject any form of causality. There is not a single model of Advaita that describes the Brahman as being the material and efficient cause in the literal sense. For the category vivarta or false projection is unequivocally advocated by all the Advaitins within the school of Shankara. The mother of all misconceptions is to read Advaita along the lines that Brahman intentionally self-multiplies to make the cosmos. What this entails is that the Brahman has both intentionality and the possibility of multiplication. That is, it is spatio-temporally determined, for only the entities that are spatio-temporally determined can multiply. The sky, therefore, cannot multiply. This also entails that Brahman has a subjectivity. In contrast, the Advaita texts constantly repeat that Maya, avidya, sometimes considered as identical and other times as slightly different, is the material cause for the world. All the narratives of creation are, in the absolute sense, a mere metaphor to describe that all that exists is Brahman alone. Therefore, neither the identification that Brahman is full or perfect, or the statement that the Brahman creates the world is nothing more than an interpretive device to instruct the singularity of the Brahman. On the other hand, we can adopt the Srishti Drishti model and consider real causation of the world, and in that case, we'll have Isvara as the cause for the world, albeit Isvara does not create the world out of nothing, as he only allows the stimulation of karmas in the beginning of the creation cycle, so that the embodied beings can experience their corporeal presence and engage in the world accordingly. If God is an initial mover, Brahman is not, for the already stated reasons that it lacks subjectivity and it is motionless. If we want to consider Isvara as an initial mover, there is nothing initial in the Hindu paradigm, as creation is cyclical and beginningless. Even when Isvara is all-powerful, it is not perfect, for it becomes possible contingent upon Maya and its projection suspense. Basically, its reality collapses at the event of self-recognition. In the ultimate sense, Advaita rejects any possibility of motion, for the perfection of Brahman rests not just in it being changeless, a category also applicable to God, but also being non-agentive and non-temporal. If the argument is that Brahman is the most simple, non-composite one that causes all composite forms, we are imposing attributes applicable to material objects to the Brahman. The simplicity of Brahman is comparable to that of the sky, and the sky is not the simple substance that aggregates in giving rise to complex forms. Accordingly, Brahman is not a class, a universal, of which the world would be a particular. Brahman is neither a concept nor a substrate for concepts. From the perspective of pure existence and pure necessity, we can argue and equate God with Brahman. If the existence of things are to be derived from the pure basis of existence as the Brahman, Advaitins would have no objection to this argument, given that this is only for a conventional understanding of Brahman. For, in the absolute sense, the positive attribute of the existence of the Brahman is only in order to negate the positive presentation of negation, as would have maintained by the Madhyamaka philosophers. But even the criteria of being for itself doesn't apply to Brahman, as the Brahman is not a reason for the being of Brahman. Neither does the Brahman create the world for its purposes. Furthermore, if Brahman were to create the world for its purpose, this would make Brahman imperfect. Even in the case of Isvara, his causality rests on karma, as he is agentive only in stimulating karmas and not in determining the fate for the embodied beings. Now, one may wonder, how can we advance the project of comparative theology by delineating the incompatibility of categories? The response is simple. Just like an entity can be defined by means of positive attributes, by means of affirmation, or by negative attributes by means of negation, our comparison does not require a common ground, a common understanding. If we initiate our discourse grounding on difference, we already accept originality in each culture. Our social harmony is not a product of flattening our differences. Advaita neither teaches that differences need to be expunged at the level of our conventional reality. Actually, conventional reality rests on the ground of difference. Our social coexistence depends on our ability to recognize our differences so that in the quest of finding universality, we stop imposing our perspectives onto the others. We can learn, modify, and refine our cultural categories. And for that, our cultural dialogues need to rest on the parameters of difference. Thank you so much. Now I welcome questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Sthaneshwar. I have a question, okay? Well, first of all, I appreciate very much your effort to really respond to our call for papers, and you did a great job trying to find out whether or not Brahman possessed this or that property or divine attribute. Yeah, that was great. My question is about Isvara and Brahman within Advaita. You spoke mostly about Brahman. And I was wondering if we can somehow go beyond that textbook view that we get, that Isvara is the illusory Brahman, the Saguna Brahman, and that the only real Brahman is the Nirguna Brahman. So first of all, if you can somehow go beyond that view, and if we can, what is really the relationship between these two concepts of God within Advaita, Isvara on one hand and Brahman on the other hand? Because again, from this textbook perspective, it seems that the Isvara is just a psychological concept of Brahman. It might exist, I mean, inside our minds, but it doesn't exist in reality. It has no ontological existence, if I may use this term.
From the theological perspective, if I may, we can access to Isvara through positive terms, as Isvara is the creator of the world, Isvara is omniscient, Isvara is omnipotent, and such and so. And for Brahman, actually we can have the glimpse of the Brahman through negation. All the positive attributes have to cease at one level. All concepts have to cease at one level. The mind has to stop at one level for us to engage. It is only upon reflection that we come to theorize the absolute being as a necessity for the being of something, because there is something. And so it goes along, but another point would be for, again, theological perspective to relate to the humankind, that the Brahman of no will, no subjectivity, is not there for grace, for working towards our spiritual progression. We cannot relate to the Brahman in any personal basis, but with Isvara in all the infinite forms, we can have a personal relation, bhakti, personal bond. But what happens at the end, that's a little tricky, but in the Advaita at least, is that when all these forms are subsumed within this pure consciousness as a negation of all the possibilities, but it itself as a possibility. It's not a sheer negation, because in that case, it would be the Madhyamaka of Nagarjuna. But while itself being the being, it's not the being of the becomings, the modes of existence. And therefore, the Brahman is only accessed through negative language. Isvara can be accessed through positive terms. But why? One more point on Isvara, that Isvara is defined more clearly in the Gaudapada, Karika, and Mandukya Upanishad, is the collective for the deep sleep subjects. So just like I have my waking individuality, I'm separate from you, and my subjectivity in the deep sleep does not make a very distinct identity because I'm not aware of it. But even then, there's not a total collapse of my individuation, or otherwise I should not wake up next day and retain my memory and individuation. So Isvara is the collective of all these in the collective sense, like a forest for the trees. If each of the mind in the deep sleep mode is an individual, like a prajna, the individual subjectivity has its own name, prajna. The collective name for that would be Isvara, meaning like a humanity and an individual. So collectively, I have humanity, but I'm not the only one possessing humanity. Humanity is just a term that describes all the humans having that particular property shared. Isvara is the property that is shared by all the living entities. All that is there. It's my positive being. But those positive beings, my subjectivity, my identity in the collective identity as Isvara, there is no identity as the Brahman. So Brahman doesn't have any identity. Brahman doesn't feel this is me, this is time for creations, honey, sweetheart, let's study it. No, there is nothing like that. So therefore, the Advaitins needed these two different criteria within the absolute. Like in many regards, Isvara is the absolute, but not in many regards, the absolute of the Brahman is what it is, but then it's just very passively being there only. And it's just a possibility for possibility. And what about the Ishvara's will? Because from the Advaita perspective, that desire is required for agency, and then agency comes from desire, comes from certain level of Maya avidya. So therefore, even Ishvara is not absolutely free from Maya, because he still wants to enjoy, because as long as I am in this limited body, I recognize my limitation and I have this desire to be limitless. And hypothetically, that desire is fulfilled. Like before I get this final mode of self-realization, then I become Ishvara. Ishvara is therefore like the emperor's seat in this sense, that you, before dissolving into this pure being, achieve this state of all-encompassing I amness, and that is Ishvara. But that all-encompassing I amness is not the ultimate goal of Vedanta. And we can move to other philosophies, but I'm just limiting myself to the Advaita of Sankara. So these are the main basic differences and the necessary conditions to create these categories within Vedanta. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We have some questions in the chat, but we have time, so I ask people to unmute themselves and talk and speak loud. So Nishant Kumar would like to ask a question, and Anderson again. So what do you think of that? You just unmute yourself and ask your question instead of me reading them. It would be kind of boring.
May I start the question, sir?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor, for this wonderful paper. So my question is like, before ascribing like all kinds of adjectives or say qualities to the Brahman or Ishvara or God, like it is non-dual, it is being, non-being, both, neither, composite, non-composite, it's a universal or particular, like etc, etc. So we have to first explain that other question. And the other question is that is the Brahman or God or Ishvara is a thing, entity, or it is a process of phenomena. If it is a phenomena, it cannot be God because it is continuously changing. And if it is a thing, it needs a space-time continuum to exist. Then also we cannot consider it as a God. So, so what it is like? Is the Ishvara like? What's your point? Is Ishvara God or Brahman is a thing or a process of phenomena?
That's a that's a really good question, actually. But number one, if it is changing, it's not God. That hypothesis I reject. But that invites a very lengthy conversation, and at least not within the Advaita of Shankara, because they are not accepting the change within Brahman or change within Ishvara either. Therefore, I don't need to defend that particular position. But what is does Ishvara change? I kind of got lost. What can you give me in one line question again, please? Sorry, I apologize.
My question is the God, Ishvara, or Brahman is a thing or entity, or it is a process or phenomena? If it is a process of phenomena, yeah.
It's okay, got it. Okay, for a process is a concept. A thing is a concept. You cannot have a thing and without having the concept of a thing, because you cannot affirm a thing. There can be things, I'm not denying, I'm not going into solipsism, but what I mean is when you address this is a thing, I have a concept for a thing. And when you identify something as a process, and I have a process as a thing, process is also a thing. Don't separate that. As a concept is a thing for me. So in both accounts, whether you consider a process or a thing, we are talking about two different concepts. Concepts can emerge only when you have consciousness. Brahman is consciousness, and Brahman is the pure possibility. Only upon this pure possibility that we can imagine thing or no thing. Brahman is therefore also no thing, because even the conceptualization of nothing requires the consciousness itself to be there, to have that presence. So, or being, for the sake of that whether it is a thing or a process has a being, a thing has a being. Brahman is the being. Brahman is both the thing and the process, not as the thing or a process, but as being within thing and within process. There is no problem in Brahman being a process or a thing, but Brahman is neither process nor a thing. Brahman is the possibility that encompasses both processes and the things. Does that make sense, sorry, at all?
Yeah, but I think I beg to differ that thing and process are one and the same. Okay, I think this debate will go on.
Yeah.
Thank you for your insights.
Thank you. So next we have Anderson.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so Professor, thanks for the
ahead.
class. I'm not sure if I understand it correctly, but it seemed to me that Brahman couldn't be compared to the idea of the one, since it cannot be quantified. Now, please correct me if I'm wrong. And the other question is, if you are familiar with the Lurianic idea of Insof, and if it would be possibly equivalent to the idea of Brahman, since it looks for me equally apathetic.
Could be there. We can have two types of one. You know, we say we have one sky, and I can say I have one orange. So when we say one sky, that's not really counting the sky. It's just affirming the not having any number for the sake, not having any reference for numeric identity. So I'm rejecting even the oneness also for another reason, because one is a concept. To have something as singular is a concept, and all concepts are limitations within consciousness. Every single concept is a demarcation within consciousness. And therefore, if we want to see Brahman as unmarked, uncharted territory, boundless, even the word boundless would not describe it, because Brahman cannot be any of the concept. And what it is then is just the possibility without which nothing can be. It is the being of being. Therefore, for anything to exist, it has to be there as the basis, as the foundation. And it's a consciousness in its pure possibility that for me to be aware of anything, I have to have that latency or pure possibility of consciousness so that I can be conscious of you or my pen or my book or anything else. So all these concepts are subsumed within the very possibility of the Brahman. But Brahman cannot be subsumed in yet another category. That's all I'm trying to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Ruth, your turn.
Hi, yes, thank you very much. Just coming back to what you just now said, which I did not have in mind as a question, but I think an important point is that we don't have consciousness, but we are consciousness, also according to Advaita Vedanta. Anyway, my question was to an earlier remark. You said the goal is not to realize that we are the all-encompassing I amness. But if that is not the goal, and then I mean the goal in the terms of everything that comes with that, then what is the goal according to you?
There's no goal. Sorry, but the fact of the matter is, in the Mandukya Karika of Gaudapada, he says, Na nirodho na cha patir, na baddho na cha sadhaka, na mumukshur na vai mukta, ittesha paramarthata. Meaning, no nirodha, there is no cessation of the world, neither the origins of the world. Neither is there anyone in bondage, bound, and then anyone practicing, striving towards realization, sadhaka. Na mumukshu, there is not somebody seeking liberation, nor is there someone who is liberated. This is the absolute truth. This is the Advaita. But then we say, then what is the point? The point is we just don't get it. And the whole point of understanding Advaita is to get it, to realize. And when we realize, it's like a nightmare you wake up from, and then you describe, oh no, nothing, there was nothing there. There was no monster at all. And actually, I just, it was all a misunderstanding. Or sometimes it happens to me. I once in a while, like I'm looking for my reading glasses while wearing the reading glasses, and then the realization comes that I have been wearing the reading glasses all along. And so what is the goal is to have this realization, but does that realization give us something new? Do we become richer by that? Or do we become like all these market Advaita, you become happier person? This is the commodified Vedanta. So
No.
it's not about becoming happier or sadder or anything like that. It's the goal of Advaita is just to realize that everything is as it is, and we just had not understood that.
Yeah, I totally agree in the sense that what we're talking about is trying to wake up from the dream that we are in, to realize that we are the dreamer already. Yes, but by saying that there's no path whatsoever, which is very popular these days in what I call neo Advaita, non-dualism in America, all those teachers. There's no path whatsoever. Yeah, as people, we suffer in the dream, and we're trying to find a way out. We want mukti, we want release, we want liberation from the cycle. And
I do agree with that also. So from the unrealized, because there's somebody who is realized, and then he would say one thing, but from the perspective of someone who has not realized, then he has to work towards actualizing the absolute. And then for that, one has to refine one's own concepts, and one has to actualize the pure being of being and the consciousness as it is effulgent through its modalities in the expression of different concepts, or even the bliss for that sake, ananda, whatever the way we were discussing before, like a joy, or I was going to jump and let's say joyance of Lacan, why not? Whatever the term, even ananda, what we have is this fragmented modes of little glitters of everything, of being, of consciousness, of joy. Everything is like in droplets, never ever being fully quenched in our existence, in our knowledge, and in our joy. And we have this urgency towards having more and fulfilled. And then the path is then, if we were to have this inverse experience of becoming Isvara, then we would be in the totality of the joy, and then of consciousness and of being. And then, but that would be just a reaction to our limitation. I am limited and I want to be boundless. And then I don't have to have any of these things. I'm done with both. And then that is when that absolute being only, or consciousness only of God would start appealing to us, because we at this stage have this urgency to be full, to be happy, and to have consciousness. And that is met, therefore, by being God, being Isvara. I'm using the term for God for Isvara. So we can achieve actually the status of Isvara, up to Isvarahood is. And then, of course, there is no subjectivity. We can be Brahman, but there's no can be. There's no active effort towards becoming the Brahman, because becoming Isvara is possible. Becoming Brahman doesn't make sense. There is no becoming or striving towards it either. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alan, you had a question, right?
I'll mute myself. Thank you very much for that. It's and thanks for taking up this how can I put it, this very interesting subject of Isvara and Advaita thought. This idea of Isvara, you brought up different ideas of Isvara first of all, and then you finally were saying that actually Isvara is kind of a property owned by all positive beings, a kind of realization just before, not even the kind of say becoming Brahman, but whatever, Brahman happens, I guess, whatever. And then we have other ones, other ideas like the idea of Isvara as creator God and Isvara as initial mover and so on and so forth. But even in the final one you mentioned, that this property that's owned, you have a kind of dualism there. So would it be a case then pretty much in all cases ontologically, in the sense of existing and not existent, that all cases of Isvara collapse into Maya?
Yeah. But we do not need to read Maya in some negative term, though, because I think St. Gandrian has a very good book, or old one, but it's still very relevant book on Maya. And Maya is a very positive entity. Maya makes it possible for the manifestation of, and what manifests through Maya is not just some illusory forms that we can detect. Otherwise, then there's no Maya at all. So we are convinced that it's real, and that is only when Maya is working. And so Isvara is Mayavi. So Isvara is the one who possesses Maya. Indro Mayavi Pururupa Iyate in Rigveda. But this Maya in Rigveda is not some negative Maya that he needs to dispel and toss it and then be liberated from. He has these powers, potentials. So, but at the end, yes. That is why Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta wants to not even stop at the stage of becoming Ishvara and just let that also go. It's like a kid. You offer him sweet and he's unhappy. You just gave him a tiny piece of cake and he's asking for more. And you give him the whole cake. Now have all you like. And then you may eat sometime because you have like a whole, like a 100-pound cake. And then after a while, the cake doesn't appeal to you. You don't want to eat cake anymore. Done. Because right now, we are living in a tiny piece of cake world. We can't imagine that we could ever be so fulfilled that we don't want to have cake anymore. It is beyond human comprehension because we are conditioned like that. But then when the entire cake of the world, this is dropped onto us, or we create that, all the cakes for us, we don't want cakes anymore. That is the Advaita, absolute Brahman for you. Therefore, cake or no cake, it doesn't matter. But with cake is God, Ishvara, without cake is Brahman.
Another way to you reminded me of another thing. I was talking to who was I talking to? A friend of mine, James Madeo, who works on the idea of liberation during what is it called, Jiva Mukti, and this idea that so you have the texts and everything that teach you to basically what we are, Brahman up and all this stuff, and how do they fit in as a reality? And he explained it in terms of being part of a pedagogy, part of a teaching process. Could you say something similar of Ishvara as well?
Yeah, I would agree. I like James's work, and I think something similar is going on. But for me to be very certain about it, I need to really have things in letters. But yeah, I like the angle in which he has read. And I think there is, and also from some of his readings of Sankhya materials, I love it. And I think that there is a new way. He has some new insights to think along these lines. And I think I can agree to many of the readings there.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you very much, Professor Sthaneshwar, for being part of our project. This is a very, very important contribution, really. And so I don't know if Alan want to say some concluding words. Okay, so our session is over. So tomorrow, 3 p.m. Central or European time, we are going to have our last session. We're going to have 4 talks, one by David Lawrence, whose title is The Philosophical Concept of God in Late Non-Dual Kashmir Shaivism. The second talk will be by Christopher Chappell, Panentheism, the Bhagavad Gita. The third one by Alan Herbert, characterizing the Gaudiya Vaishnava concept of God as the possessor of Shaktis. And the last one by Johannes Bronkhorst, Religious Disbelief in Classical India. The Zoom link is the same. So hope to see everyone tomorrow. Have a nice day, evening, night. Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for being here. Till tomorrow.